If you are a beginner in fishing, it can be very difficult to know what you need when you walk into a fishing store and see a lot of different lures. Today, we will talk about the main groups of fishing baits and see how the baits look underwater. Maybe not only beginners will be curious to take a look. Let's start with probably the most popular group of baits. These are silicone baits, or soft baits. Here I have classic minnow-shaped soft bait that imitates small fish. Due to its flat tail, it moves sideways and imitates a live fish. Soft baits come in all shapes and sizes, and their work may vary slightly, but if you have a tail like this, it will move similarly. Here's how this bigger lure moves. Here, as you can see, there is an additional silicone skirt. It adds a little extra movement and slightly increases the volume of the bait. Such baits can be retrieved evenly, but it is also possible to perform stop-and-go retrieve when a faster pull is made and then you make a pause and the bait falls down to the bottom, and so on. Another type of soft baits are twisters. The main feature of these lures is such tails. The lengths and shapes of the tails may vary. This determines underwater lure movement, but the principle of these lures will be similar. The tails will move very active, and the body of the lure will have less or no movement at all. Here, the first twister has a shorter and wider tail. The movements and vibration are quite large. The tail wags widely. Such baits can also be pulled evenly or using stop-and-go technique. And this twister has a long but thin tail, so the movements of the tail are not so wide but active. The lure looks long when the tail is extended, and the body, as you can see, practically does not move. And here is an improved twister. It has a skirt in the front, made of thin fiber strips, and the twister itself is attached to the back. This adds some movement to the body of the lure and also increases the volume of the lure. Let's see how it looks underwater. I also have such impressive, large twin-tail lure. Let's see how it will look underwater. I haven't tried this bait yet in fishing, so I was surprised that it spins like that underwater. The tail work itself looks quite interesting, but the spinning is not good because the lure will twist the fishing line. I am thinking that I should try to put the jig head in the front. Maybe it will stabilize the position. And this small soft bait is not quite a twister, it is more of a worm imitation. Its body is thin and quite long, so its body also moves, not only the tail, especially when using stop-and-go technique or when moving the bait with small movements. Well, another type of lures would be imitations of crabs or other crustaceans. These lures have many thin legs that can move in different ways depending on your retrieve. Enough about silicone baits, now we can move on to hard baits, crankbaits. Crankbaits are made of plastic or wood, and their performance underwater depends on their shape, weight, and the tongue. Here is a classic minnow lure with a small tongue. This means that this lure will only go 1 to 2 meters deep. With a constant retrieve, it moves sideways like a live fish. Its sides shine in the reflection of light, depending on the coloration of the crankbait. This type of lures works more interesting using twitching technique, with stronger, short jerks with a pause. This way, the minnow makes beautiful slides to one side and to the other. This crankbait has a similar sized tongue, but a different shape. It will deepen similarly, but as you can see, the movements are slightly different. The tongue of this crankbait is slightly larger. This means that this lure can go deeper, up to about 3 meters. It is also necessary to mention the sound of crankbait. Some can rattle loudly, while others are completely silent. Sometimes pike reacts better to one, sometimes to other. It is possible to hear some sound in the footage if the crankbait has one. Due to the larger tongue, its movements underwater are slightly more active and wider. With crankbait that have similar sized tongues, is still convenient to fish using twitching technique. As you can see, this crankbait has an even bigger tongue. Because of this, it will go even deeper, about 5 meters. I would no longer use such a crankbait for twitching, because the large tongue creates a lot of resistance, and you need a very hard rod and a strong movement to be able to jerk the crankbait. Also, the sliding movement itself is not so nice because of the big tongue. The tongue is getting bigger, the possible depth is already up to 6 meters, and the range of movements is even greater. As you can see, this crankbait is not very stable. It moves to one side, then to the other side. It is due to its shape or weight system. It may not be perfectly made, because it is made in China, but sometimes such strange movements can work even better than a stable and straight swimming crankbait. So sometimes Chinese crankbait catch better than the original ones. Of course, this rarely happens. Here the tongue is even bigger. The crankbait will dive up to 7 meters. There is one interesting nuance here. The shape of the tongue is wide, so the work of the crankbait does not become more active, but rather, the lure moves quite passively. But sometimes pike or walleye need exactly that. The crankbait rattles loudly enough. And here is a short and fat crankbait, or also called a bubble-shaped crankbait. It dives deep due to its large tongue and is characterized by active work. We can take a look how such a small crankbait looks like. It also works actively, and if you can hear it, it emits a sound of a slightly different frequency due to the small weights inside it. And now, let's see how sectional crankbaits, consisting of several parts, move. These are the options I have. They usually have interesting, non-standard movements. But I personally don't like them very much. Such lures work unstable. Sometimes they fall over on their side. Admittedly, I only have cheap Chinese options, so this may be a misconception. But it can be said that these are not very popular options among fishermen. Partitions make weight distribution even more difficult, and suspenders are not so common among such lures. We can also take a look at these two small lures. Here is a ratlin and a tail spinner, mainly used for perch fishing. I was surprised by the work of the tail spinner underwater. I did not know that the body of the bait itself moves so beautifully. Well, the last bait in this group will be this one. It's a small jerkbait with a twister tail. This lure has some interesting twitching action, but it was hard to show it this time. But I'd say it also looks very nice while retrieving evenly. And this bait is called mandala. I don't know to which group it should be assigned. It is made of foam rubber. It consists of several sections and is characterized by such non-standard work. Let's see how it looks underwater. I left these two self-made baits for the end. They are called bucktail baits. I haven't tried these lures myself yet, but it was interesting to see how they look and behave underwater. First of all, these puffy skirts handled themselves well underwater when got wet, and I found the work of these lures very interesting. But I noticed that for some reason, the double blades work poorly, especially in that lure with the red skirt. Maybe I will try to remove one of the leaves and see what happens then. And the white skirt bucktail worked more consistently, so I'll leave it as is for now. That's all I wanted to share with you today. See you next time.